Today on Doomed! Folks, the rich and wealthy have class solidarity. Do you? On today's episode of Doomed, with me, your host, Matt Binder, activist Rafael Shimunov will join me to discuss Ellen DeGeneres' defense of her friendship with former U.S. President George W. Bush. We'll discuss Bush's legacy, just in case you weren't quite sure why that friendship was problematic to begin with. We'll also discuss Rafael's amazing video on this whole entire thing that The Ellen Show doesn't seem to really want you to see. All that and much, much more on Doomed. Now, before we get to my guests, let me remind you how you can support the show. Patreon.com/MattBinder will help fund the show, help make it happen. You can also support the show by subscribing for free on youtube.com/MattBinder. That subscribes you to the YouTube channel, and subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts. That could be iTunes, Google Play, wherever. And now, without any further ado, let me bring up on the feed here so you could all see him and myself. La la la. Here we go. Activist Rafael Shimunov, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey Matt, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And I'm doing even better, I would say, knowing that the video you created is still out there in the world.
Yeah, more than originally planned.
Now, we'll get to that video and the brouhaha around that shortly. But, I think we should start with a little bit of background. As I set up in the front, Ellen DeGeneres is receiving tons of criticism for basically being seen at a football game with George W. Bush. She came out and defended that, and again, we'll get more all into that, later on. You have this great video criticizing her defense in a very creative way. But people might not know why any of what I just mentioned, the football game, the friendship, the defense, why any of that is problematic if, I don't know, they were born after the year, 2001 maybe? I mean, it's hard to imagine you not knowing this, let alone some celebrities' defense later on I saw where they were claiming to not have known who George W. Bush really was. And this celeb was, I believe, in her 30s. So that's not even... We can discuss that later. Let's talk George W. Bush as President of the United States from the years 2001 to 2008. We won't even get into his history before that, where he was problematic as well as, he didn't just come out of nowhere and become president.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what would you say your biggest, when you think of George Bush? Now, I don't know how old you were when he was president and what he meant to you. We can get into our personal, what it meant to us personally to his presidency as well. But what would you say is the George W. Bush greatest hit in your mind?
Oh man, there's so much to choose from Katrina to LGBTQ attacks, trying to amend the U.S. Constitution to permanently classify people, who don't deserve civil rights, apparently. And, of course, the Iraq War, torture, Guantanamo, it's unbelievable. And more recently, actually, a lot of people don't talk about this, is his role as the number one behind-the-scenes pusher of Kavanaugh as a justice, which also touches on his own justice appointments and that legacy around the country, not just with the Supreme Court, but with, as we now all know because of Trump, hundreds of judges across the country.
Right. And, it's interesting that you named, I believe 3 huge issues that people can have with George W. Bush and his legacy. And there's still so much more. Like, I was just, just as a refresher, because I have those three in my head. I have the guy responsible for the financial crisis, pretty much. I have, maybe not the guy, the leader of the administration responsible for the financial crisis. Yeah. I have, you mentioned Iraq. I mean, in my estimation, they're the whole reason that this even began to begin with from 9/11 on, in terms of just basically from what I just letting it happen, pretty much. I mean, yeah. It's not, again, nothing like this just appears. Nothing exists in a vacuum here. There was calculations made to not do things, to let things happen, to treat things in certain ways, to deal with things in other ways that created basically all the issues we have today. And if you're someone who does live in this bubble, who doesn't know anything about George W. Bush and thinks Donald Trump's the worst person ever existed, news for you. The Bush administration directly brings you Donald Trump. I mean, you don't get Donald Trump without George W. Bush.
Yeah, I would even push it a little even further, and make a lot of people, even who are like my friends and colleagues in many places, kind of uncomfortable, because there's another thing that fuels both of them. And that is this kind of like centrist or liberal, quote unquote, idea about like being nice as a replacement for justice.
Right. It's the one, and I bring this up whenever it comes up with Trump. It is, if there's anything, if you're one of those, half glass, the glass is half full instead of half empty type of people. The one thing that I am happy happened during the Trump presidency is that we're finally starting to see, maybe not with our celebs, obviously, that's why we're having this show, but in terms of politics and how people who care about politics view these sorts of things, we're finally seeing civility politics and the whole, at least there's some decency going on between our two. We're finally seeing that whole charade die. It's dead. It's buried. It's never coming back in politics, at least. We obviously still have work to do with people who aren't really as tuned in as they should be.
Yeah, one challenging thing though about it for me that I don't have figured out, and I don't know how many people do have it. There are like, I'm also working on a video about a friend of mine, Linda Sarsour, and another friend of mine, David Weissman. And David Weissman was Linda Sarsour's, like, one of her biggest trolls. He was a Trump MAGA guy, former IDF, Republican in Florida, but from Queens, like where I'm from too. And he was pretty vicious. And I just I disengaged from him. And it was actually women in my life and women in the world, including like Sarah Silverman and Linda herself, who kind of like kept dialogue with him. They didn't kiss his ass. They didn't tell him we just have a difference in opinions. They actually told him how horrible his ideas are. And he eventually came around and now is like, defending Bernie and Warren. And like, it was just like came to a vigil after the killings of Muslims by white supremacists and just did a complete 180. So there are these stories of a certain type of dialogue that's honest and not one that's like helping people wash their hands just for the sake of comfort of the audience. Right. That is constructive, I think. Now, and also it's a fine line between enabling it and changing people's mind.
Right. Now that person, Weissman, I'm assuming he has come to terms with who he was and he uses that to inform himself and others, correct? Like he's aware of his history, he's admitted what it was, and it's not even that he ignores it and says I'm changed. He uses it to inform and to maybe even help other people who were once in his position, I'm assuming.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, he was very religious and conservative, and in the Jewish religion, there's a concept called Teshuva, and and you can't actually get forgiveness unless you try to get it, and you can't get it from God. You actually have to get it from the people you harmed. So he actually went, and this is where the film comes in, where I film him. He called me up and he said, well, he DM'd me and he said, can you introduce me to Linda? I want to apologize to her face to face. And he did that. And it was just this tearful, amazing moment that, you know, like exactly what you said, he actually did come to terms with the harm he caused. And then there was love and unity and you know.
You know, I love this story because, you know, I know you know where I'm going with this in terms of Bush, but
Absolutely.
There's something else actually, and we didn't talk about this story beforehand, so this is just coming to me now, and it's something I bring up on this show too, and we're going a little bit off topic, so I don't want to go too much on this, but I have to say it because the story, it speaks to me in a way in terms of what I bring up on this show a lot, especially when I'm talking about people who get radicalized online, which is a very common topic on this program because of the conspiracy theories I cover and the different sort of far right fringe groups I talk about. You know, there are a lot of people who are true believers in this stuff and cannot be saved. And there's no reason to try because they don't want to hear from you. They don't care. But then those people, the true believers who are actually not good people, they have radicalized and sort of brainwashed in many ways people who are basically best described as sort of lost in life. And these are not the true believers. These are the people who just were in the wrong place at the wrong time, and they were sort of swayed in a way that was harmful to them and others. If they had came across someone on the left who told them, you know, that, you know, LGBT people deserve rights and immigrants are deserve to be here and have rights too, and they're just like you and me, they probably would have been swayed that way too, but just that wasn't where they were at that point in time. And, you know, you need to separate those two because the true believers in the horrible, terrible, white supremacist, racist ideologies, they'll never deserve your kindness. But those people who could be dissuaded, you know, there's reason to believe that there are good people who just need to be put back on the right track. And, you know, like you mentioned, that's when that whole kindness thing could come in to play.
Mm-hmm.
And back to Bush. The reason why that kindness can't be shown to Bush, like you mentioned, is because he's never come to terms with what he's done. And furthermore, not only has he never come to terms with what he's done, there's a big difference between your buddy Weissman, who may have supported this stuff, and the guy who made it all happen.
Absolutely. A lot of times the quote by James Baldwin comes to mind, that we can disagree and still love each other unless the disagreement is rooted in oppression and denial of our existence and our right to exist. You know, and there's no better quote, I think, for Ellen or whoever to see right now.
Right. It's, you know, it's sort of shocking to me because let's get, you know, we were speaking briefly about this before the show started. And I think maybe if we get a little bit personal, people will just understand what Bush means to people in terms of people who grew up during his presidency and what, you know, their outlook on like what, how the Bush regime basically molded them into who they are today. And I don't mean that in a, you know, we became good people because of his presidency, but I don't mean like, you know, he molded us into those good people. It was that presidency showed us everything to be against and what we didn't want ourselves, our loved ones, or our community, or our country, or any of those things to be like. And we did the exact opposite. So tell me a little bit about your life when George Bush was president.
Oh, it's kind of, I never really talk about it outside of like close friends, but I was I was never a fan of Bush himself, but there were people who kind of created a formula that, as when I was younger, appealed to me, especially at my weakest point, which was after 9/11, right? And these people weren't these dolts that this is another example of the danger of paintbrushing people as like complete idiots. And I think what you did a good job. There are people within the group who know exactly what they're doing and are designing recruitment and this on based on powerful ideas that are bad. And these people were like neoconservatives who were, to me, they challenged this like notion from the left of these idiots who are supporting these things because they were intellectuals, they were artistic, they were well read. They had like half their newspapers in New York. There was something called the New York Sun that came back for a moment. And in that paper, half of it was culture and plays and poetry. And I was just like, whoa, what is this? Everything the left is telling me about these people are lies, I think. And I grew up, I grew up in public housing. I didn't grow up wealthy. I didn't grow up with liberal parents. And to me, that kind of power was appealing. And also as a refugee, the idea of America as this savior around the country was a very powerful idea. And then that just really all was really manipulated in me in my early years, where I was like, yeah, selfishness is a virtue, like that's what makes the world go round. And then that really started to crumble with me watching the aftermath to 9/11 with the wars, and then in particular Gaza in 2014.
Oh, interesting. That's really interesting. So if you don't mind me asking, you don't have to give an exact if you don't want, but
Yeah.
around how old you were or what grade you were in, what were you in when 9/11 happened?
Oh, I was in my early 20s, and just my first job was like building bicycles and emptying trucks in Toys R Us, and I was pretty open to different thoughts, very socially liberal, and yet this movement came out with like a rebel energy. That's how they framed it, and that's what I'm seeing today now with like the alt-right, where they're framing themselves with very old, antiquated, dangerous ideas that have been debunked and trashed and destroyed, and reviving them and putting like a youthful sheen on them. And people are falling for it. There's kids like I've been I've been videotaping with consent. Like they brought me in, like Proud Boys in New York, going with them to see what they are doing, and them trying to like convince me. And what I saw was a bunch of kids who are manipulated that any group could have got to at that stage in their life and brought them one way or the other. And that's the same reason why the U.S. Army recruits that age, the same reason why every group recruits at that age.
Right.
These are kids looking for a purpose, and there's nothing more powerful than the concept of rebellion.
Right, right. Now, when you were that age, 9/11 happened, and there was the push for war. What was that appealing to you, or where did you land on that when I think there's obviously a difference between Afghanistan and Iraq in terms of how each was sold to us, but I guess in general, how were your feelings on that?
My feelings, they were mixed. That it was sort of framed to me as our interests coincided. This person that I disagreed with, Bush, and then this dictator who was genociding Kurds and other people, coincide, like their selfish interests, which was very evident to me about oil and all of those things, but that coincided with human rights. And in the cases that, like a real politic kind of case, that was an opportunity to take care of it. But it's like that old saying, when you dance with the devil, you don't change the devil changes you. And that's exactly what happened. Like there was nothing that was good that was going to come out of anything Bush would have done with those wars.
Right,
Both of them.
right. And so, how was your I guess your social circle, your friends, your family? How did they feel during this time? Because I'll get to my personal story shortly, but it was
Yeah.
it was I'll get to it in a minute. It's something that is just insane that time. I don't think people really get it. So what was your sort of the people around you? What was it like?
So my family, it was very interesting because we come from Uzbekistan and Tajikistan as refugees when I was a kid, and we lived with majority Sunni Muslim, and we dressed the same even though we were Jewish, and we spoke the same language, and we went to their mosques, they went to our synagogues, all of that. And there was always friction as any multicultural society, but it was solidarity against like Soviet Union. And so there was this feeling in our family and a close family that this thing that people are saying about Muslims is not really true. And then also because of right-wing Israeli propaganda that targets them and me all our lives, there was also this thing where, oh, wow, they want to kill us and they want to wipe us off. And Saddam Hussein, too, I think in order to drum up support from Arab nations, began like targeting Israel. And that was very useful for Bush in terms of like support for my family in that way. And also relating as refugees to Kurdish refugees and other Iraqi refugees that were being created by Saddam Hussein and Kuwait and stuff like that. So there was this thing, but then it was kind of watching in real time this conflict of two forces amongst the people closest to me take hold. And outside of me, I didn't really have friends that were very political. We were all, it's Queens, very lower to middle class. Everyone's just like working, talking about like what's next, like what's on TV when the little time that we have not working. But yeah.
Right. So for me, it's something that I bring this up a lot online in terms of, who is worse. And it sounds silly, and I don't mean it really as a competition. Like I don't want Trump to beat Bush in this area. Like I'm not going like, yeah, be worse. But I bring it up to prove a point to people. And to me, there's something that's never really talked about. When you compare the Bush era to the Trump era we've had so far, now granted, let me say this up front, Trump's not even, he's still got another year plus. So who knows? But at this point in time, Bush has already brought us into two wars. 9/11's already happened. We already see our freedoms being, the Patriot Act is already underway. We have Muslim people and really anyone of a certain shade of brown being vilified. I will never forget. I want to bring up his name actually because this moment sticks with me all the time, and I bring it up around every 9/11 actually when people start talking about the ridiculous. I hate this framing so much of the day after 9/11. It always comes up the day after 9/11 when everyone was apparently singing Kumbaya in this country, and there was no color, and there was no race, and there were no problems. And I can tell you straight up, if it sounds like bullshit to you, it is, but I can tell you straight up from someone who was there during that time period that it was bullshit. And that's because I will never forget this event that happened in this country. A Sikh man was killed while working at a gas station just days after 9/11. It's one of the first instances, in this country of a retaliatory attack on someone here for what happened on 9/11. And it was a Sikh man. I'm pulling up his name because it's stuck with me. His name was Balbir Singh Sodhi, and just working in Arizona, just doing nothing wrong, and he was murdered because he was wearing a turban. Like, this is what the Bush era was all about. And like, you think, like, yeah, the Trump doing what he did early on in his presidency, where he blocked people from certain Muslim majority countries from coming in this country. Horrible, terrible. A stain on this country with all the other many stains on this country. But, there's just something in those you could take out of those photos and those moments of all the people in this country rising up, protesting at those airports, standing up and welcoming the people who were making it in. You didn't have that. You didn't even have that during the Bush era. Like I can't even. I'm a Caucasian kid from Queens. I can't.
Oh, you're from Queens too.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what it was like to be a Muslim in this country during the Bush era. You had no one, and I could imagine that because of my experience during the time around 9/11 and right after during the Bush era. I was a 15, 16-year-old in high school. I was pretty into politics for someone my age. 9/11 radicalized me. I in terms of how much more I got into politics. And while I was always a progressive when I got into politics, I would say 9/11 full on made me that early I became a leftist. I didn't need to wait for Occupy Wall Street or Bernie 2016. So I remember just being against the wars and just saying that. It wasn't who I was. I could hide my feelings on the wars if I wanted to, but just saying I was against the wars. You were looked at like you had 20 different heads. It was not something like, yes, in 2004 there was the huge anti-war movement, but right after 9/11 that wasn't there. We went into.
You could look up the Michael Moore speech for the Oscars and see how Hollywood reacted to him when he said really honest things about the fictitious war and the fictitious president. It sounded like 99% of that audience wanted to take him off the stage.
Right. I was watching that earlier actually, and it's amazing to see people booing someone criticizing the Iraq war. I should phrase that as amazing to see in 2019, because then it was just the norm. I don't think people really remembered that anyone who went out there and spoke against the war were the villains. They were the bad guys. Janine Garofalo was public enemy number one to this country. The Dixie Chicks, careers over because they had a microphone and wanted to use that for what they saw as the greater good, and they spoke out against the war. Bless them. And they put their career on the line, and they lost it.
And Kanye West at that time too.
Right, Kanye was a little bit after, when it was a little bit more.
A little bit Katrina,
Yeah, a little bit more okay to criticize Bush then. But that first term of Bush, he was, if there was any moment that was as close to dear leader in this country as possible, that was it, man. People think the Trump people are will do anything for Trump. Imagine 90% of the country feeling that way about Trump. That's how it was during the Bush, that first Bush term. It was, and to me the biggest thing, and it also, on top of millions of more deaths under Bush than there, I think will ever be under Trump, because, man, if Trump pulls off everything Bush did, he's got a lot of catching up to do. So millions dead under Bush. But then on top of that, and this is where, I talk about how it shaped me as a 15, 16-year-old kid living in Queens, growing up. Those are your formative years. There was no one to, I had my little clique of punk friends, and we were against it or whatever. But the broader public, it just wasn't there. There was no one to turn to if you didn't have that local support with your pals. In this era, 2010, 2011, 2013, on down to 2019, the age of social media. If you want to speak out against this stuff, you can find people across the country who will show you, hey, you're not alone. You know, there are movements out there that are agreeing with you. We could beat this together. You know, you feel good about that.
Yeah.
That did not exist during the Bush era. You felt alone, and everyone around you was waving those flags. You know, man, you know, the flag manufacturers, I can't imagine that an era where they made more money. It was something
It's
else, man.
incredible. Uh, it was incredible. And it was like, even I, like, there was this IT guy that was working in my office later on, and he was like Mr. Conspiracy Theory, and he was like warning me about the NSA, which I never heard of, and talking about like mass surveillance and this and that. I'm just like, oh man, you're a tinfoil hat. And to this day, like half of the things that he said was just like completely revealed, and it was interesting that even with an open mind, like how we pushed him away, and he was just sharing like actual facts, like, and he had sources and things, and we just didn't even bother to even entertain it.
Right. It was so weird. Like, I don't think there was never a period where I thought there was something more like a repressive regime running the country. It was, in modern times at least. I mean, I'm sure
Yeah.
there's instances in our history that are on the same level in terms of what presidents have done. Obviously, I mean, this is a country that still can't even reconcile with its past with slavery and internment camps and hundreds of thousands of other things. But to think that this was 2001 to 2008, it's just like that wasn't that long ago, man. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's also kind of, I guess, surprising to me just hearing you say all that and how much has changed in terms of like people actually speaking the truth on human rights, even though it seems bleak. Like watching that clip of the reaction to Michael Moore in Hollywood, I can't imagine that happening, at least to that level today, at all.
Oh,
Yeah.
if you're a celebrity today, you're cool if you're criticizing Trump. I mean, you criticize Trump and you'll actually get jobs. Look at Alec Baldwin. I mean, you criticize Trump and you will get work. Back then, you criticize Bush. Not only would you not get any more work, you would have lost everything you've built up. Your career would have been over. You would be a footnote in your industry's history. You were just like, today we just bring up Dixie Chicks today. It's not even like we've retroactively gone back and given Dixie Chicks everything they've lost. No,
Right.
If anything, people just bring up the Dixie Chicks as an example of what happened back then. They didn't get any of the fame or the fortune they lost back. That's done.
Yep.
So, it's just something that I think people need to really consider. No matter, and I'm not doing this to at all rewrite Trump's legacy. Trump is a terrible person, horrible person. But you just can't come to terms with who he is. And you can't feel the way you do about Trump without understanding why we are where we are today.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, we could go on about Bush, and I don't want to make this a complete show about Bush's legacy because, this is a little bit more to it than that. I think this episode is about basically how people are coming to terms with it today. Mm-hmm. And celebrities, man, are just not, I don't get it. Why do you need to put your arm around George W. Bush to prove that what Trump's doing is bad? It doesn't make any sense to me.
So in the most generous sense, like the most generous, artists and creative and especially comedians, often like funny people, develop that because from this sense of like wanting to be liked and wanting to have as much, and that's and not like embracing conflict. And she's made $500 million doing that, right? We're not touching anything that's controversial, and doing a very type of corporate type of liberalism, And in the more realistic sense is that she knows exactly what she's doing, and she's sending a signal that nothing is going to stand in the way, other than nothing's going to stand in the way with between her $500 million to her full billion, which she's on her way to get. But she's sending a signal that this is a safe place for a safe space, right? But like for anyone to come on this show, and you won't be questioned. You won't be, because she also had Bush on her show, where they actually kissed and danced and did the whole thing. So like it's a message to celebrities that, yeah, you won't be able to go on these other shows, but you can come on my show and I won't challenge you. And this is where you get to clean your hands. And that's how she's going to make her second $1 billion. Her second $500 million.
But see, here's the thing, though. I don't even get how the money calculation comes into play. This isn't, we're talking $500 million here. She has a highly rated, probably, I believe, I mean, I'm just guessing here. I don't have the stats in front of me. I'm going to assume she's got the highest rated talk show, especially
17 million viewers. Yeah.
Right. I mean, especially that Oprah's no longer in the game on network television. She's got to have the biggest daytime talk show. I mean, 17 million sounds huge, but it's probably the biggest. I can't imagine someone who's bigger than her. There's literally nothing she can do that's going to lose that for her. This ain't the Dixie Chicks in 2003, 2004. This is, it's you are being generous because it's stunning to me and there's also not to pass by this either. So she's at this football game. Pictures come out. Someone snaps photos or the television show, the television network that's showing the game, catch Bush and her hanging out in the stands, whatever. Gets aired out there. People screenshot it, post about it online, criticizing her. That could have been the end of it. Like it could have been. She could have just ignored it. She, like you said, 17 million viewers, $500 million. She'd gone on with your life. This wasn't exactly being talked about on the Today Show. This wasn't something she couldn't ignore. She made a conscious decision to come out on her show and discuss this. Like, there was no reason to. She wanted to defend her friendship with Bush. Again, not because she had to. It wasn't like advertisers were going to flee her. It wasn't like her TV network was talking about canceling her because she was in the stands hanging out with George W. Bush. She chose, with nothing on the line, to explain why she was friends with George W. Bush.
And well, she did a little more than that. She could have just let it be that photograph, but then she not only doubled down and said, "Well, we have a friendship," and she also gaslit us. She heard all the criticisms about LGBTQ and Katrina and Afghanistan and Iraq and everything, and she ignored all of them and turned it into, like, very craftily, like in media they call it pivoting. In the resistance, it's gaslighting. And what she did is gaslight us and pivot into, oh, this is just about Republicans and liberals, that we could be friends even though we disagree with each other. Then she minimized it and of course it's not minimizing it for friends who are animal rights activists, but she minimized it to a lot of people by comparing it to wearing fur, which could be a more apt example if maybe it was the person killing 1 million, animals and making them suffer. But she compared it to someone's fashion choices, which was that really had me seeing red. And when I saw that, that's what really pissed me off. It wasn't the picture of her sitting with George Bush, even though that's another chapter in kind of establishment folks rewriting his arc and cleaning his name. It's hilarious because when I saw her do that speech, those images in the background that I put in is what I saw before I put in the background. And that's what you saw and what other people who know about George Bush saw. So really the video was just putting in front of other people what we see.
Right.
when
I'm gonna play your version of the video in a second, but I just want to talk a little bit more about this because, I saw people say this, so this isn't an original thought, but there is a difference. But I agree with it, so I'm going to mention it. This, there is a difference. Her defense is a good defense if, you're talking about your conservative uncle or a family member, or just someone who supports, those sorts of conservative or right-wing ideals. Everyone's got someone like that in their family. They got to see them around Christmas or whatever holiday anyone celebrates, Thanksgiving, whatever. There's a difference between, hey, Uncle Bob, nice to see you. Hope the family is okay. Uncle Bob, while he may vote Republican and be an asshole, he's not the one calling the shots. He's not the one responsible for we could argue, we could always, there's an argument to be made, and I agree with it, that, you vote for someone like that, there's some blood on your hands. Sure. But that aside, he's not the one who actually is the commander-in-chief, who decided, hey, we're going to do this thing that's going to result in the death of millions of Iraqis. He's not the one who decided we're going to create a surveillance culture in this country, one that, still to this day is profiling Muslims and dark-skinned people and making great grannies take off their sneakers at the airport. We're not talking about the person responsible for all that stuff. We're talking about a guy who, for 8 years, was the most powerful man on the planet. Second most powerful if you consider Dick Cheney to be the guy actually pulling the strings in that administration. But that aside, the most powerful guy on the planet who did everything I just said. It's just not comparable. It's like you said about the animal rights activists and fur and people who wear fur. I would even say it's her example is even worse because, find me someone who, a fur. I don't even know if you could blame a single fur company for murdering that many animals.
Right.
That's a lot of dead innocent people.
Yeah.
And 1 million is I believe the conservative estimate. We will never really know how many people actually died.
There are still kids being born today with impacts of the depleted uranium. A lot of people don't know what that is, and we used pretty toxic chemicals and metals and things in order. The justification was that it goes through tanks and this and that, and really what it did was plant a lot of toxic things in the environment. Which, like when I was looking through the photos to make the video, I had to, ironically, because this is all about how Ellen censored Twitter, ironically, I had to censor myself first because I couldn't use all of the most powerful images, because then it would have just been flagged for graphic violence and stuff like that. So those images I've never seen before, and they're still actually being produced now with children being born.
Right. So let me play this video. People who are listening to the podcast version of the show, which will come out after this live stream, will just inform. You're listening to audio, so you're just going to hear. Rafael has done nothing to the audio of this video. It's just Ellen saying her piece, her defense of her friendship with George W. Bush. But visually, and this is where you should go online, if you're not going to catch the replay of this live stream on YouTube, definitely, I will. There's a link actually in the description of my video. You could easily find right there of Rafael's video on YouTube of just this. Visually, this is just incredible. And it just shows you just how powerful, just a simple remix, a simple edit of something can completely change the meaning of how the original wants to come across. Let me play this video right now. Again, if you're listening to the podcast, you're not going to be able to see this, but I please go. Let me pull it up. All right, here we go.
So I want to talk about something that happened this weekend. I know it's Tuesday. Sometimes I like to ruminate on things all day Monday so that on Tuesday you hear about it. So this weekend I went to Dallas for the Cowboys game. And thanks. But during the game, they showed a shot of George and me laughing together. And so people were upset. They thought, why is a gay Hollywood liberal sitting next to a conservative Republican president? Didn't even notice I'm holding the brand new iPhone 11. And, but a lot of people were mad, and they did what people do when they're mad. They tweet, and but here's one tweet that I loved. This person says, Ellen and George Bush together makes me have faith in America again. And exactly. Here's the thing. I'm friends with George Bush. In fact, I'm friends with a lot of people who don't share the same beliefs that I have. We're all different, and I think that we've forgotten that that's okay that we're all different. For instance, I wish people wouldn't wear fur. I don't like it, but I'm friends with people who wear fur. And I'm friends with people who are furry, as a matter of fact. I have friends who should tweeze more. And I have... But just because I don't agree with someone on everything doesn't mean that I'm not going to be friends with them. When I say be kind to one another, I don't mean only the people that think the same way that you do. I mean be kind to everyone. Doesn't matter. Even people who are already playing Christmas music. I mean, seriously. There's no excuse for that, but I'm kind to them. Anyway, I want to thank Jerry Jones, Charlotte Jones for hosting us, and thanks President Bush and Laura for a Sunday afternoon that was so fun. By the way, you owe me $6 for the nachos.
You know, just A, what she's saying is gross, and B, your edit is incredible. It's first of all, as someone who does video, I want to just say I appreciate a good use of chroma key. Very well done. And then the imagery, there's especially one shot. I'm going to bring this up. There's one shot, and other people have brought it up. And it's a pretty famous picture that shows, and I don't even think, we mentioned the war and how people who died over there in Iraq, but I don't even think we really spent any time on the torture we were responsible for. People were being tortured. And, okay, I don't think anyone should be tortured. But if you're one of those, a-holes who think, bad people should be tortured to get information out of them, well, again, number one, it's proven that doesn't work. Actually, torture does the reverse. You're not going to get any information out of people if they know something by torturing them. And then, two, the people who were being tortured were not guilty of any crime. We don't know what their role was. They could have been an Al-Qaeda person. They could have been best friends with Osama bin Laden. But they also, and as we now know, many of them had nothing to do with it. They were just people who were just rounded up and picked up. If there was any sort of guess that, you're hanging out in this area, they lived there, and they were tortured.
Oh, yeah. It was proven that a lot of soldiers, like if one of their mates would get harmed, that they would go into a village and ask who did this, and they would have to produce somebody. So people with like historical vendettas would just like say, my neighbor there who always parks his car in front of my house, he did it, and then they would grab him and make an example. Like it was really gross. Or they would do it to get cash rewards, and they would just turn in strangers. They would make up names. And those are the people in there. There's a lot of the first people, and I was very lucky. I was working with them. Is the Center for Constitutional Rights. They were the first lawyers that went to Guantanamo to actually find out who these folks were that were in there. And all of those people who are still there today have never been charged with anything at all.
Right. It's stunning. And I mean, there are people just walking among us here who were deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan during that era that probably did some pretty terrible things. I mean, we just don't know. I mean, the stories that have come out are horrific. And again, That's just the stories that have come out. Can you imagine what's still unknown? It's I could only, I have this image up. Incredible. I'm sure you purposefully made sure this photo was there. That infamous photo of the hooded detainee being tortured, hands out to their sides. It's almost like that's like a Jesus-esque photo, except the guy's being tortured with his palms out. And you've put this photo behind Ellen just as she does the same gesture. And it's really just visually incredible. Because it just, there's no better, imagery that can get across just how ridiculous what she's saying is when you reflect on what she's basically just pushing aside. Now, before we end here, I appreciate you spending this time with me tonight. Let's talk about what happened to this video. Now, obviously, people online are sharing it. They love the video. But at first, it almost didn't really see the light of day beyond maybe the first couple thousand people that saw it before something happened to it.
Yeah, I immediately knew when I posted it that it was not going to explode. It was just like, slowly it reached like 10,000 views. But that's, just like regular, like people could just be passing it and not actually watching it. And then when it was taken down, people started to pay attention.
Now, when you say it was taken down, I just want to make sure people understand if they're not familiar with this story. You didn't accidentally delete the tweet. What happened to it? Like, how did you, what happened to it, and how did you find out?
So what happened was the Ellen Show, who uses lawyers, filed a copyright claim. And it's a pretty false copyright claim. In fact, if you go through the process yourself on Twitter and file a copyright claim, it actually warns you in multiple screens, do not file this claim if this is commentary or satire or it's just something you don't like, because by US law, you are liable for the legal fees, and you're violating Twitter terms of services, and you're violating the US copyright law. So they actually warn you multiple times through that process. And that person, whose name is somewhere out there, actually someone leaked it to me who that worker is, and he's a lawyer, and they actually multiple times, not just my video, but like when people saw my video taken down for the fraudulent copyright notice, they started uploading copies of the video in resistance to it, knowing that they're putting their Twitter accounts at risk. And some of these accounts had like a couple of hundred followers, and we're seeing, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000 views on their copies of the video. And it just started exploding across the web. And they started this race where they were just as fast at censoring it using that tactic as people were uploading it. And once people started hearing that this was happening, everyone just started uploading it. And it looks like they just gave up at a certain point because it started to hit the news cycle.
The Streisand effect in full effect.
The Streisand effect.
Right. I will give it, I will give her the benefit of the doubt, and they show the benefit of the doubt. A lot of these times, these lawyers are hired in general, not for specific takedowns. They're basically hired to scour the web, usually not even individuals. They hire these firms, and there's automated systems that scour the web looking for, re-uploads, ripped versions of shows to take down for copyright issues. But in this instance, so she might not have been aware it was taken down when it was taken down. Probably didn't even know it existed at first. But we're well beyond that now. We're at the point where it's almost impossible to believe that at least someone working on the Ellen Show isn't aware that this video exists. And they can easily reach out and pull this copyright claim on your video so it is allowed on Twitter again. Yeah. Clearly,
there's an open secret inside the Ellen production of how opposite she truly is and how micromanaging she is and how aware she is
Ooh, do you have
about a
some?
lot of these things. And it's if you ask anyone like off the record who's worked anywhere near her, you'll hear about it or just Google it. But it's
Do
also
you have a
if you
scoop
look
to
up
give
her
me? You got a scoop to give me?
also if you look up her executive producer, Andy Lassner, he's very active on Twitter, and he's very much one of those people who glorifies Reagan and Bush, and anytime Palestinians are blown up, he's talking about how that had to happen and they deserved it. Like, he's a real piece of work, and he's very much involved with the whole Ellen production in a way where he kind of actually, just like from a Trump style, MAGA style, actually relishes people attacking him for those things. And he's very much her bulldog in that way. And I'm sure he was involved.
I remember him being the talk most recently because when Bernie Sanders said billionaires shouldn't exist, this guy, listen, this guy is probably very wealthy, probably, it's six figures, if not maybe seven figures. He ain't a billionaire. So what is this guy doing? He ran out to defend billionaires. It's like, listen, buddy, if you think there's a difference between millionaires and the rest of the world, I can tell you that billionaires are even looking down on you, you know?
The other ironic thing is Ellen. If you look it up, Rolling Stone, Ellen copyright lawsuit, she was sued for actual copyright infringement, where she stole all of the, without permission or paying, every song of her intros where she dances into the stage.
Are you serious?
She never paid for any of those. And she was sued by, I think, Sony Music or someone for it. And that was also like an Andy Lassner kind of thing. Like, they have $500 million, her personally, God knows how much the show makes. And they couldn't even pay artists for just to play their song on their show, thousands of songs. So this is like a real irony in them actually, falsifying copyright stuff when they were actually legitimately lost a case or settled out of court a case that where they actually were stealing thousands of songs.
Listen, if friendship with Bush isn't enough to turn you off Ellen, then come on, at least going out of their way to not support artists should be the nail in the coffin with your liking Ellen. I mean, unbelievable, really unbelievable. I began this show with the rich show class solidarity. Do you? And I mean, I don't think there's anything that better shows just how these folks stick together than this instance of Ellen and Bush. I mean, a guy who doesn't even look at her rights as equal to his, and she's just a difference of opinion, man. That's all she thinks.
What's interesting is that she has banned people from her show. If you look up Vince Vaughn, once he's an idiot, and he called electric cars gay. And he said, not homosexual, but, my parents chaperoning the dance gay. And she banned him after that. And then Kathy Griffin did a whole monologue about how mean Ellen is behind the scenes and how opposite she is of her persona. And she was banned for that. And then there was a gospel singer who was saying really homophobic things. She was paired up with, she works with Pharrell of Nerd, and she said homophobic shit on social media somewhere. And Ellen, of course, banned her. But the proof is in the pudding, because Kevin Hart, who also said homophobic things, wasn't, and he was actually defended by Ellen. So if you reach a certain amount of wealth and power, like Kevin Hart has, you have a clean slate with Helen, even with homophobic comments. But if you are anyone who's still kind of like either like B or C or whatever out there, you're going to be banned from the show. So you're absolutely on the nose with class solidarity.
We're going to have to probably revisit Vince Vaughn's ban then, because it sounds like his ban was probably lifted, right? I mean...
it was. They are lifted eventually.
But that does say something. It's really telling that, I can't imagine the liberal psyche better laid out on the table than right there. Say something like that. There's repercussions. Responsible for murdering people. actually responsible for the laws that subjugated people to becoming second-class citizens in many ways, taking away their basic human rights. That stuff, not the same. It makes me so angry that I might have to go out there and look for something that can be easily chroma keyed so I can make a video.
Apparently her show always has a blue background behind her, so you could definitely, people have been requesting, and once this is settled, so I don't get my Twitter account banned, once this is settled, my next one is going to be with Katrina backgrounds, and then one with LGBTQ people who were impacted by George Bush.
I wasn't even thinking of that. I'm sorry. Are you pursuing this in the legal matter here to get your?
Well, I have a petition out with Color of Change. It's on my Twitter at Rafael Shimunov, and I'm starting that way, basically just to get people behind it. And people are sharing it and signing, and that's directed to Twitter. But I've also been reached by, and I don't know if I can share their names yet, but like organizations that talk about free speech on the internet, and like corporate control over content, and they are kind of exploring interest in it. So we might take action.
This is a real problem online, and this is honestly another hour. But so I'll just mention this briefly. It is a real problem online, regardless of the platform, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, whatever, where it's really case by case basis in terms of which commentary, which sort of fair use creation will get pulled down, and there doesn't seem to be any real guidelines. I mean, legally there are, but in terms of how it plays out, your stuff can be taken down and it'll only go back up if there's some sort of legal action taken, which means it's going to be down for a while, to the point where, in this case, it may not even be relevant to the news cycle anymore. So,
Right.
I think there's a broader issue here that these things have to change so the copyright holders don't basically use these takedowns in bad faith to further, instead of just gaslighting us by defending George Bush, they'll gaslight you by taking down the criticisms of that defense too.
Ellen has a whole side business called Ellen Tube, which uses fair use to get videos of like cute cats and children and those kind of like Instagram things. And they just grab them from Instagram and social media and use them on commercial run things without, using like, actually, maybe it's not even fair use, but it's just ironic, like the unequal power, and also how Twitter defaults. Like it takes it down without hearing the appeal. It just automatically takes it down, siding with power, and then allowing this cumbersome process to in effect censor the internet.
Right.
Yeah.
I said this on the last show I did right before this one last week. It was an episode on the Biden, Trump, Ukraine saga that we're still going through, and I brought up at the very end that I obviously don't agree with him on pretty much everything, and I'm not going to die on this hill. But Trump's Nickelback video should not have been taken down.
I agree.
Fair use.
It is fair. In fact, I think Nickelback could have done much better by actually saying something, instead of being quiet and kind of wimpy through that whole thing and just quietly taking it down from the background.
That's a great point, and it mirrors the Ellen thing. It would have been so much more powerful if they spoke out. What an easy way to gaslight everyone on the situation by just pretending it never happened.
Yeah.
Rafael Shimunov, activist at, look at Rafael's Twitter account, and there is literally a dozen different organizations that Rafael actively works with. Great person to follow for not only these videos, but to see what he's doing on the ground too. Where can people follow you and your work?
Most active on Twitter at Rafael Shimunov. You find me also on Instagram at Rafternoon, and also Facebook. But yeah, that's pretty much, Twitter is the place. And now I just put in a YouTube. I'm on YouTube now with that video because so far they haven't taken it down.
Right. Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what YouTube does. They're always there's no one more hit or miss in terms of these takedowns than YouTube. So it does surprise me it's still up, but in some ways it actually doesn't. Are you monetizing it? Is it monetized or no?
No.
See, that's probably why they're not going to care about it until there's an ad showing up on there, and then they're going to care a lot. That might be the one thing saving it.
Great.
Rafael, thank you so much. Keep us updated on the situation with the video. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Peace. Thank you.
Take care. All right, folks. That was a lot of, I guess fun is a fair way to say it, because I got out a lot of things that I am always saying about George W. Bush, but we got to do a whole episode on it. Made me feel good. Always good to get my George W. Bush feelings off my chest. Let me pull up. There we go. Let's go to the second half of the program. But first, patreon.com/MattBinder. This show is not possible without all you fine folks who are patrons. We are really growing the show. The show is truly bigger than it's ever been. But that doesn't mean we're quite there yet, not even close. So if you can afford to, patreon.com/MattBinder. I don't ask for much. Just go there and become a subscriber. Become a patron if you can. And your name will be read out on this show alongside these exceptionally fine people who are also Patreon subscribers. Abigail T., Adam Q., Alan B., Andrew C., Andrew H., Ari R., Ben, Benji, Bobby M., Brosnan, BZ, Champagne Kame, Chi, Christine H., Colin R., Dan, Dan K., Dan M., The Dans, Dank Uger, Dave K., David Z., David P., The Daves and Davids, Dragon Slayer, Eugene, Froz K., FTW All Day, Greg D., Grim, Ian Curtis J., Jameson Test, Janelle A., Jasmine H., Jeff K., Jeremy M., John G., John S., Jonathan B., Jonathan L., the Jonathans and Johns, Joseph R., Joyce M., Justin M., Justin S. We got 2 Justins now. Nice. Katie S., Kat, Kaushal, Lisa D., Lisa H., the Lisas, Max W., User Me, Melissa M., excuse me, Mitch V., Michael B., Michael J., Michael M., the Michaels, Mr. Danks, Nicole A., Namde Net, Null Style, O Death, Romina O., Ryan Left His Best, Scott R., Sean H., Cena, Stephen S., Struggle Session, TM, Tammy G., Thaddeus A., Tina M., Tom G., Tom M., we got the Toms. What do you mean videos? Why That Tie Guy, Will P., Wootopian, Zachary P., and Zarin. Folks, this list is getting long. Get in while you can, because there's going to be a point where I can't read all the names out. And the preference will go to the people who've been supporting me the longest. Otherwise, you'll just get randomized. And who knows, maybe you'll get mentioned once in February and not get mentioned again until October. Who knows? Get in now. YouTube.com/MattBinder to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Help us grow there. That's free. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click that little bell notification thing too, so you get the notifications when we go live. Really wanting to grow the YouTube channel. I think that's the key to the show continuing to grow. Also, subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, wherever you listen to your podcasts. You could also go to doomedpod.com and listen to the episodes right then and there. Links to everything are on doomedpod.com as well. Leave a review on iTunes, whether it be a star review or a written review. That does help bump us up in the iTunes ratings and helps people find the show. And most important, and this one costs you not a dime, tweet about the show, post about it on Facebook, share the episodes, tell your friends about it while you're discussing whatever you're discussing on the weekends. Tell your family about it when you're having dinner. Really, just spread the word. Word of mouth goes a long way. And that's it for the free first half, the version that's for everybody, episode of the show. Always giving you great content, in my estimation. I think everyone who's talking in the chat right now the YouTube live chat right now, can agree, based on what they're saying. Join us and I'll read all those chats, comments, questions. It's a great time in the second half of the show. We really, we shoot the shit. Patreon.com/MattBinder. Otherwise, I think the next episode is going to be a debate, post-debate live stream, because next week we got the Democratic debate. Should be a good one. See you guys all next time on Doomed. We are back. What's up, everybody? How you doing? Thanks for sticking around. Hope you enjoyed the first half of the show. Pleasure to see all you paying subscribers. You guys are my number ones, You are the ones I think of when I'm doing this show. Doing it all for you folks. So let's get right to it. Well, first of all, let's bring this up. Breaking news today. Shep Smith is leaving Fox News. I guess I know the resistance, #resistance people were very upset. He has been fairly, he's been pretty fair in his criticisms of Trump. But come on. Fox News didn't become bad the moment Donald Trump became president. This guy was fine with how it was before that. I get it. Without him there, it's certainly a problem that there's not even a semi-critical voice over at Fox of the president. But I'm not going to break out the violin and post my memories of Shep Smith as if he's a wonderful human being leaving behind a great legacy and he passed away. Like, I've seen some people act like we're doing an in memoriam at the Oscars or something. The dude chose to leave Fox. If anything, from what I'm reading, he left because he couldn't take the opinionated shows at in prime time on Fox. The Hannitys, the Carlsons. He couldn't take them constantly talking trash about him and undermining what he was saying, pretty much. But if your whole thing is that Shep Smith is the voice of reason at Fox News and we need him there, then I can't think of a more selfish thing than to leave Fox News at this point in time. Especially we're going through a time period right now where the president is about to be impeached. If you really are critical of Trump, take one for the team, bite the bullet, let your feelings get hurt by Sean Hannity talking trash about you in prime time, oh boo-hoo, and continue doing your hour of news where you could get the truth of the matter to the Fox viewer and maybe sway some of those people into supporting impeachment. It's that simple. It's incredible to see people acting as if the poor guy had no choice in the matter. At first I thought, they pushed him out. But I'm reading reports from people who have insider sources at Fox News, and these are well-respected journalists I'm reading, not the insider sources, the people reporting this. And it seems like Shep Smith has been talking about his exit, how he wanted out of his contract. They wanted him to stay because while he's not the highest rated show on Fox News, he wins his hour in the ratings when he goes head to head with the other cable news networks. I mean, Shep Smith has selfishly left behind any of the Fox viewers who have been brainwashed, but could, with a little bit of push and a healthy dose of reality brought to you by people who are straight up telling the news as it's happening and not spreading misinformation and disinformation, could be swayed. He's leaving those people behind. It's that simple, because he doesn't like his co-workers talking trash. I'll take his. I'll work for Fox News if in his spot. Let them talk whatever they want to talk about me. I welcome it. I'll do the news for an hour. Unbelievable. Just really, give me a break. The resistance out there acting as if Shep Smith is some sort of hero. Shep, welcome to the resistance. Just, come on. How long has Shep Smith been working at Fox News? Let me see. When did he start working for Fox? La-di-da. 96. Guy's been there since the beginning. Give me a break. He was cool with all the stuff they were saying about Obama. I'm not even talking about politics-wise. You're a Republican. You're one of those common decency Republicans. I'm not talking about Obama's politics. You were cool with all the race stuff going on in Fox News during the Obama years? Pfft. Get out of here. Let's go to the comments. Kennedy's watching the show from a restaurant. That's hardcore, Kennedy. What you having for dinner? Oh, wait, what? Oh, I ate dinner at a pumpkin festival. I am extremely into that. But then I had dessert at Frisch's. I don't know what that is. We don't got that around here. Oh, hi, Pops. Evening doomers, my dad said. Dad's in the chat. Ryan wants to know what Kennedy had for dessert, and Kennedy delivers. It was like a caramel pumpkin spice ice cream cake. Now we have a whole conversation with Grim and Ryan and everybody else, and they're basically drooling over Kennedy's ice cream cake. Good job, Kennedy. It's one of those things you only need to eat once in a lifetime. And now I'm convinced that I got to make a vegetarian version of a big boy in chili, says Kennedy. Ryan says, just because you only need to do it once doesn't mean you should only do it once. Okay, guys. I get it. I'm actually really hungry now, too, and I haven't had dinner yet. Kennedy might be able to watch the show while having dinner. Not I. So I am starving. So let's keep going. I'm not going to cut the show short. You know me, actually. I usually go long, actually. I usually give you guys way more bonus here. I'm not gonna cut it short, but I'm not gonna give you guys the way long bonus today. We're gonna cut out probably around 45 minutes in. And when you see what everyone who's listening to this right now, to look at the full time code of this bonus episode for patrons when it's uploaded, and laugh at me saying we're gonna cut it at 45 minutes, when you realize I've probably went at the very least 5 to 10 minutes over, if not more. Grim says 9/11 was our Reichstag fire. My Pops says, quoting good old G-Dub Bush, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, Won't get fooled again. Let me read that better. I haven't done the Bush voice in a while. Let me do the laugh to get into it. Okay. Fool me once. Shame on you. Fool me twice. Won't get fooled again. TPA Bob on Periscope. Trump is not yet responsible for thousands dead in Iraq, both troops and civilians. Well, for American troops, it's thousands. For Iraqis, we are talking millions. And yeah, you're right, I think. There's probably a couple thousand that Trump is responsible for death-wise. But it's probably nowhere even near. It's probably single-digit percentage, if not less even. Grimm says million dead, displaced, and wounded Iraqis, right? Francis at the beginning of the episode said, this episode is going to rule. I hope it did. I hope you think it did. Jose Tres, when we remember W. Bush, just think one thing. First 9/11, this was what he spun into the racist state we are living in now. That was his first move. Thousands of Americans became collateral damage, right? Grimm, the whole world is King George's canvas to paint the permanent war state into existence. Absolutely. And very poetically stated. Shayna, evening, lovely leftists. Sup, Shayna? Hi, Misha. Grimm. Grimm. Dick and Georgie will never be brought to justice. No, they will not be. And if you're someone like me who doesn't believe in a life after death, then it's even worse to know that there's literally going to be no repercussion. There's no to. They got away with it. And they will live happily ever after. Very rich, very wealthy. The history books might tell it for what it is. But clearly we're seeing that people in their everyday lives, in the culture, in the discourse, they're ready to rewrite history. So it's depressing. It's really sad to see. Terrence, how you doing? Hello, Matt and fellow Doomers. Gary says, I always knew Ellen was a jerk. Shayna says, yeah, Grim, it's definitely a mind-blowing thing. Nazis were so much easier to deal with back in the 80s. Internet really set that community off. A little bit of an opposite of what I was saying, but yeah. You got your pluses and minuses with the internet. Pros and cons, Ryan says, Matt dropping so much truth. Thank you, Ryan. I hope so. Gary says, gulag for Ellen. Ryan says, the Bush administration turned me from a small-town chud to someone on a leftward trajectory that's still ongoing. Right. I wasn't a small-town chud, but I'm right there with you, Ryan. Cher says, my children were young when Bush led us to war, and it was devastating. Anyone paying attention knew it was a lie. Shayna says, just take Ellen's money and she'll be a normal lesbian again. Nah, she still got power. If she was to go bankrupt, she still has power. Something would need to happen. She would need to do something scandalous. Otherwise, she would be one of those success stories that bounced back from nothing. Even though she would have all the contacts and connections and networks in the world to bring her back. Taking money from people would definitely put them back, into being like everybody else. But then there's the part where you accumulate so much money that you accumulate power. And then that's when it gets extra problematic. A family of 4 living in a McMansion with 2 cars in the driveway because one's a doctor, the wife's a doctor and the husband is is a lawyer, and they are making mid six figures or something, maybe even making $1 million or $2 million a year. There's not, there's no class solidarity there. They're certainly in the 1%. But you take all that away from them and they don't really have power. But these folks, when you're talking hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, there's a power that comes with that they need to literally break any of those, they need to burn those bridges for them to truly lose what they once had. Otherwise, easy for them to accumulate it all right back up. I mean, rich people don't lose money like you and I. We lose our job, we lose everything. Rich people just got to sell off their shit and live slightly under the means they were currently living under. They never really understand the pain of being laid off, losing their job, having no money, living in poverty. It'll never happen. They have their own version of a wealthy safety net. Ryan sarcastically saying conservatism is the new punk rock, right? Grim in reference to Rafael bringing up the Proud Boys. I hope Gavin's neighbors are still making his life very, very uncomfortable. Renee says Ellen looks like a Republican. Only Afghanistani women can liberate themselves, says Renee. Umar says punk rock is something that goes against conservatism. How can someone be so stupid to say it's the new punk rock? Right. Yet that's what Paul Joseph Watson, a.k.a. Prison Planet, is pushing. Gary brings up white women elected Trump. Absolutely. Grim says Ellen was never funny, just innocuous. Her only purpose is to sanitize the heinous. Right. Right. Ryan agrees with me that Bush was far worse than Trump. Renee says El Dushi is worse. It's straight fascism. You think Trump is worse, Renee? Disagree. Umar says racists are just jealous of lovely brown skin. Ryan says anyone brown got fucking terrorized on 9/12. So miss me with that nonsense. I mean, they're still getting terrorized from 9/12 on. In many ways. Renee says Bush and Obama set the stage for fascism. I agree, but obviously you need to notate that it was in very different ways. Because obviously a black man was not actively pushing for, what we are seeing today. But yes, he certainly set the groundwork and laid the stage for it along with Bush. But Bush, way more so. And purposefully. And knowing what he was doing. And wanting this final outcome in many ways. Honestly. Grim says, no, Bush was a fascist as well, right? Renee bringing up the celebration of bin Laden's death, right? That was... We didn't even bring it up on this show because it really wasn't relevant to the conversation. But that's another just incredible, surreal thing that only happened 8 years... Was it 8 years? No, less, right? 8 years ago, I think? I think it was 8 years ago. Right, 8 years ago. Man. What do you... I don't even... That's something for another day. Renee on Bush being a fascist. This is what he's saying. Proto-fascist, not ethno-nationalist, but still economically focused on war and in bed with corporate power. You know, Bush wasn't openly like an ethno-nationalist. Like, he wasn't out there saying he was a white supremacist. But whether he knew it or not, a lot of his policies were pushing white supremacy. I mean... Grimm says, maybe it's more appropriate to say that Cheney was a fascist and Bush was poorly rehabilitated, useful idiot. Listen, I agree with the idea that Cheney was pulling the change and Bush wasn't very smart. But I also don't like the idea that Bush has no agency. Like, he was an idiot in terms of politics and policy. But the guy was still like a functional adult. He knew what he was doing, what he was going with. He might not have come up with the plans himself, but when Cheney and Rumsfeld and his administration laid this all out on the table and said, we're going to do this, I mean, he is the final word here. He could have said no, but he didn't because he decided to go along with it. Shayna says, in terms of what pushed her left, I didn't need Occupy. I had Bob Marley. Cher said, there was a huge anti-war movement if you lived in Portland, Oregon. Right after 9/11, I'm telling you. I mean, I wasn't in Portland, Oregon then, so I don't know. But right after 9/11, man, I would say up to 9/11 up to a few months after we invaded Iraq, there was no voices out there fighting back. And if there were, they were demonized and their lives were ruined. Kennedy says, I will always bring up how I wasn't allowed to listen to the Dixie Chicks for almost a decade. Wow. Renee says Johnny Depp tried to say something but then punked out. Dixie Chicks had more balls than Depp, says Renee. Oh, Rafael was in the chat while he was on the show. Is that a first, I think? A guest chatted it up in the live stream? Rafael says Portland led the way on much of that in terms of the anti-war movement. Well, it's good to hear. Mount Pleasure on Periscope says Kurt Schlichter voice. That's all, folks. I see someone saw my my Kurt Schlichter edit that I re-uploaded on Twitter this week. Go on my Twitter and you could see that. That's one of my faves. Dorian says, it was way less fanatical and delusional in Bush's case. More widespread maybe, but not nearly so cult-like. I disagree. Everyone all of a sudden was waving a flag, wearing a flag. I was in high school at the time. All of a sudden, every kid had a flag in their locker. It was something else. It really, and Bush had the highest... I believe Bush, at that point in time, had the highest approval rating of any modern-day president. Still to this day. It was unlike anything you've ever seen. Either you didn't live it, or you forgot. It was a cult. And, the cult of Trump, maybe, for the person, which you could, you could argue that's worse or that's better in terms of, once Trump is gone, the cult pretty much loses their whatever power they have, whatever relevancy they have. But the cult around Bush was the cult of a version of patriotic nationalism. It was, I can't even put it on par, to be honest. And it was the entire country. It must have been like 90% of people. There was just no fighting back against that. There was no internet. There's an internet, but there was no social media networks. There was no, established forums where everyone was already congregating to organize and fight back. It was. Look how long it took for the anti-war movement to take off. There was the big demonstrations in 2004, and that was put together by established grassroots activists who spent years building up networks and connections and organizing. Today, just add a few people with big followings on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube. Post an event you're putting together on whatever social media you prefer, and you can almost guarantee there's gonna be people that show up. People have power now they didn't have during the Bush era. Jay Jareba says those fucking flags were everywhere, right? Renee says, what happened to Cliff Schecter anyway? Wrong show, Renee. But I don't know what happened to Cliff Schecter in the Majority Report. I do think Sam's increasingly leftist audience was no longer taking to Cliff. Renee says, support our troops and now enjoy your football game. Right, that's where it all came from. We didn't always do the national anthem before football games. Shayna says, that's the thing about conspiracy theories. They take disparate pieces of information and weave it into a narrative that seems plausible. Cher says, I'm old enough to remember Vietnam, so it was double devastating. I'm not, but I can hear that. Cher, I can hear that. Shayna points out cancel culture is strong AF with the right. Absolutely. Kennedy says, when the Dixie Chicks performed with Beyonce at the CMAs, I cried. Jay Jareba says the Bush years were fucking hell. Grim says Dylan Roof, James Alex Fields, Nicholas Cruz, Robert Bowers, all of cancel culture. Yeah, those are all the mass shooter white supremacists. Or killers in some people's case who used other means to kill. Like cars. Terrence says, Kanye actually got a bump from criticizing Bush. Most of the DC's fans were CNW fans. Kanye came, though, 2005 Katrina? It was a lot more acceptable then to criticize Bush. And he was criticizing something that I think was pretty, well established at that time was a failure, the Katrina response. He may have put it in a way that was unacceptable to people at the time, but the meat of it was a criticism of his handling of Katrina, and I think it was a lot harder for people to disagree with that. George Bush doesn't care about black people. Great moment. Too bad Kanye is who he is today. What a fall from grace. Kennedy says Ellen is an embarrassment to white gays everywhere. Grimm says Cornel West and Refuse Fascism suggest we take to the streets on October 19th. Send me more information on that, Grimm. I haven't seen that. Shayna says, Ellen's show averages around 4.2 plus million viewers per episode, according to syndicated daytime television ratings, making it a highly viewed daytime show. It usually only trails behind Live with Kelly and Ryan and Dr. Phil in total viewers. Terrence says, I used to watch Ellen. Earlier this year, I started to avoid it. I don't know why. But now I have a reason not to watch her. Grimm says, the rich care more about animals because they view the poor as less than even animals. Johnny Silver says, as if Dems ding... what? Oh, as if Dems don't, you mean, have blood and corruption on their hands. Oh, they do. They do, absolutely. I've said that on this show many times. In fact, there's probably people out there who think I criticize the Dems more than I should. I mean, Bush is a war criminal. But in a way, every president has been a war criminal, including the Democratic ones. But Bush is definitely a war criminal. In every way. Kay Bassey says, is the volume low for anyone else? Oh no, I hope that's not the case. Was the volume too low? You're the only person I saw. Dorian says, Matt's volume seems a bit low compared to Rafael's, but not too bad on my end though. Well, I'm sorry about that. I'll fix it in post for the podcast for sure. I'm sorry about that. Folks, if you're in the chat and you notice early on my volume isn't where it should be, please let me know. I will adjust it accordingly immediately. Shayna says, dude, I flew to Thailand in 2004 and got strip searched. They took my hormone, the whole 10th month supply. It was very humiliating. That's horrible. Plus I lost Plus I lost $200 worth of it. Not 200 million. Been throwing around the word million a lot. Big difference, but still horrible. I'm sorry about that, Shayna. That's terrible. Dina, I'm sorry. Don't overlook the fact that G-Dub is not a political ideologue. He never gave a shit about abortion or LGBTQ or anything beyond money for him and his rich class. He was a religious guy. In a bad way, obviously. He definitely is a true believer in many sense. He's not only a grifter. Kay says, love the discussion. We need to hold these people accountable. We haven't forgotten. Joshua Money in the Periscope chat says, Trump is the anti-war president. Yeah, okay, buddy. If you think so. Grimm says Trump is the neo-Nazi president. Polish carpenter, I'm assuming talking about my soda drinking. Fucking product placement. Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm looking at the context here. But you were joking about my soda drinking like people like to do on the show when they watch the live stream. You were talking about Ellen's reference to her iPhone during her defense of her friendship with George W. Bush. Yeah, incredible. Umar says brand new iPhone 11 joke was mega shit. Yeah, I unbelievable, really. Just, her defense was stunning. Grimm says liberals are conservative. Rafael, my wonderful guest in the chat, says, look up fishhook theory regarding liberal and far right. Right. Terrence says, "Oh, the Twitter police are breaking down my door." Oh, because I played the video. Right. And you were watching it on Periscope, Terrence. Right. Oh, man. Grim says, fishhook theory greater than horseshoe theory. Better than horseshoe theory, right. Horseshoe theory is dumb as hell. Dorian says, the precise timing of the Abu Ghraib photo was grimly perfect. It was fantastic. Umar says, how do studio audiences laugh at super bad jokes? Ryan says, Umar also says, chroma key, FTW. Ryan says, with Rafael on this, the fucking minimizing of Bush's war crimes by comparing him to people who wear fur or playing Christmas music is so fucking infuriating. I even forgot she said the Christmas music thing while we were talking because I was just so enraged by the whole of her defense. Renee says, to her, it's a difference of opinion. Guess she never had Gore Vidal on her show. Terrence says, I RT'd the Twitter taking down the video when I found out. Joshua says, Trump decided not to retaliate against Iran. Trump pulled out of Syria. Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize. You clowns are lefty snowflakes. Trump is the anti-war president. And about me, he says, dude needs a haircut too. Trim and shave, $10. I read your stuff, Josh, because this show, censorship free. Everyone's got a voice. But aside from your views on my haircut, which is just a difference of opinion, you wrong, buddy. You dead wrong. Daniel says, Ellen's habit is such a bubble that she tried to use her social and cultural capital to recuperate a war criminal. That's how much of a bubble she is in. Yeesh. Right? Kennedy says, LOL, Andy Lassner's a joke. Daniel says, Ellen squandered her social and cultural capital trying to recuperate a war criminal because of her bourgeoisie associations. Ryan says, Ellen's also a scab on top of all this awfulness. I did not know that, but it makes sense. Shana says, I just don't find her funny. Umar says, Doomed, the TMZ edition. We were talking about some of that inside, behind-the-scenes view of the Ellen Show. Renee's making reference to Ellen DeGeneres' Richard Spencer-like hairdo. Oof. Ellen is trash, says Lord Ariane. Misha says, I never found her funny and her show seems really shallow. This is a Dunk on Ellen bonus episode of the show. I'm here for it, though. Umar says, Matt has feelings for George Bush. Very funny. Kennedy says, Rafael's video is great and we stan. Lord Ariane says, Ellen is liberalism personified. They don't stand for anything. We got some fun inside jokes going on in the chat. Not going to read those for everybody else who's not in the live stream, though. We got Kennedy sharing her view on lips being sexy in some sort of debate with Renee that I don't even want to know about. So I'm just going to continue scrolling. Let's see what you guys are saying. Oh, the debate's coming up. I mentioned it on the first half. The debate's coming up. I'm looking at some guests to have on for the post-debate show. I've had Mike from the Humanist Report on a couple times for post-debate shows. I've had the last post-debate show, I had Nomiki Konst on the show. She was great. On one post-debate show, I had... can't remember. Who did I have on that show? It's kind of forgettable, actually, that one. It was a podcast, I remember. A bunch of guys from a podcast. Wasn't that great, though. Oh, right. The Bad Praxis folks. They were on the show, right. Ooh, yeah, that's right, Kennedy. That's right. I'm messing with you. If I didn't really like you guys, you wouldn't have been on the show. What's the website again? Bad Praxis. I'm not gonna give away a website that isn't real and it isn't registered to you guys. So Google Bad Praxis podcast, folks. That's Kennedy and Chi's podcast. Wonderful friends of the show, who will not be coming back on the show, by the way, until all three of them become patrons as per our agreement. Dorian says, I'm glad Shep left. He lent Fox News credibility they don't deserve. It's a great point. Renee joking that Dark Gritty replacing Geraldo. Maybe. I would do it. I would go, listen, if Fox News I wouldn't work for Fox News in like behind the scenes position to like help them create their, like I wouldn't work in production on Sean Hannity's show. But if they wanted me to be a contributor or a host or a guest, I would take it in a heartbeat. Absolutely. It's my chance to reach a wide audience. And I'm not going to be won over with money. I'm not going to suddenly change who I am. I'm not going to sell out. You guys are going to have someone speaking, leftist ideology, pushing for policy that helps the 99% on the biggest cable news television network there is. So yeah, hell yeah, I would take it. Also, I would surely take the money that comes with a Fox News gig. They pay well, I hear. Very well. Ryan says, fuck the Shep Smith. He also says, and God, fuck the resistance libs. They annoy me so damn much. Full Arsenal says, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. Fuck you for fooling me twice. Oh man, I forgot to promote the super chat. That sucks. Womp womp. All right, well. Let's go back to the comments here. Oh, looks like somehow a bunch of comments got hidden in my little comment stream here. Let me see if I could. Let's see. Champagne Kami says, "What are your thoughts on this leaving the Kurds out to dry situation? Good or bad?" Not good, folks. Not good. I'm all for, anti-war, pulling our troops out, but there had to have been a plan that didn't throw our Kurdish allies, who, by the way, many of them include Antifa and communists. It's a contingent of leftists in an actual group that's fighting on the battlefronts here, the war front. And we're leaving them high and dry. It's not good. Not good. And then I'm hearing that ISIS members who they had prisoners are escaping due to what Turkey is doing. Don't believe Trump saying he's doing this to pull our troops out because he's Mr. Anti-War. That's bullshit. Don't believe it. Don't believe it. Celeste says, another Portlander here, and yes, we had a pretty big movement locally. Then it must have been good to live in Portland, because I got to tell you, in Queens, yes, even in diverse Queens, it wasn't so easy. D. Scully says, I would swear that one of the largest protests in history took place after 9/11. Don't confuse the fact that they weren't televising with it not happening. The anti-war stuff was huge, but that was 2004. That really isn't right after 9/11. I mean, there really wasn't that big of a resistance to going to war in Afghanistan and Iraq. There really wasn't. It was after the fact, and it was too late. We were already there. Did this huge anti-war movement come about? D. Scully says the reason Garofalo was so appreciated, Jeanine Garofalo, was because she was allowed onto platforms due to her status in Hollywood. So she used those opportunities to speak out. We couldn't be seen. Right, and she paid the price. She was harassed, driven from her home, threatened. Her career certainly took a hit. I mean, there's a reason you don't see Jeanine Garofalo. You didn't see Jeanine Garofalo around for very, very much in the years following her speaking out against the war. I mean, she was a fairly big celebrity then for a comedian. And I mean, she didn't have the lasting power she deserves, I think, talent-wise, because she spoke out against Iraq at the time. And Bush. Grim says, I think there's been other guests who stopped by in the chat, but not as much as Rafael. Maybe Jared Holt, if anyone. Maybe. D. Scully says, G.W. Bush's highest rating was 60%. That's pretty big. Skis says, the anti-war movement before the Iraq War was the biggest and most organized the U.S. has ever seen. It was the first time in our modern history that large groups of Americans demonstrated before a war. I honestly don't remember it, if that's the case. I mean, I'm typing it, and it's not the first thing that comes up. I'm being given Vietnam. I'm seeing, it's not. All right. Looks like there was decent sized protests before the war. Let's see. All right, man. That's good to see. I got to tell you, though, as a high school student growing up during this time and being fairly politically active, just wasn't where you needed it to be, you know? I mean, but again, I'm seeing a lot of smaller events that took place. And then there was, I believe, October 26th, 2002, there was a major action all across the country with hundreds of thousands of people. The critical mass bike rides, I remember those. But again, that's fairly small in the big picture. And other than that, it seems like most of the anti-war demonstrations were around the world. Which I should have mentioned. There certainly was a global movement against the Iraq war because obviously it was a global event. But what, one or two big events in the U.S.? U.S. was not leading the charge in the anti-war movement, I'll tell you that much. They just were not. And then, yeah, all the big protests, the biggest protests, I should say, happened following the war. I mean, an estimated, hundreds of thousands, with the NYPD deputy commissioner putting it at 800,000 at one point for the RNC anti-war protests in August of 2004. So yeah, I guess maybe looking back, history changes, time changes how I felt as a high school student, but we needed those large-scale ones beforehand. And they were big ones, but not that big. D. Scully says, I think you guys are looking at some sort of one-day total, which is statistically irrelevant. I remember that Bush was unpopular throughout his presidency. There was a reason that they specifically chose his audiences. Bush was the only president in memory who vetted the audience at town halls in order to ensure that there were people present that liked him. Right, but his approval rating was... Obama never had an approval rating as high as him, I believe. What was Bush's highest approval rating? Someone said... 60%. I knew I saw this. I knew this was true. Bush began his presidency with ratings near 60%. In the time of national crisis following the September 11th attacks, polls showed approval ratings of greater than 85%, peaking at 92%. And a steady 80 to 90% approval for about 4 months after the attacks. So yeah, it wasn't really until the Iraq War did his approval start slipping to the historically low numbers it became. I knew I wasn't just making it up. I knew I wasn't. Invasion of Iraq, the day of the invasion, approval rating was above 70%. We don't get below the 50s until around mid-2004. I'm sorry, I'm right on this one. This I remember. He was a popular president, guys. When the country was attacked and he was talking about how America had to be tough when he was standing on that rubble. And then in the months after, and when we invaded Iraq, he was still a popular president. I remember because I remember the overwhelming sentiment towards anyone who spoke out against him and the wars. This was a moment in time that I just won't forget. And while I may have looked over some of the big protests before the war, I have a rock solid memory of pretty much all of this. Wait. Kenny, what are you doing deleting the D. Scully's messages here? Don't do that. What are you doing? Undelete those. Kennedy, you're killing me here. I gotta go through and undelete these so I can see what he's saying. Kennedy, I'm gonna remove your mod privileges, Kennedy. Kennedy. D. Scully says, that being said, D. Scully says, I think you guys are kind of fooled by the propaganda from the time. Well, no. The propaganda at the time worked, and these things were real. Those approval ratings were real. That being said, D. Scully says, Matt was always my favorite at the Majority Report. Right, I'm not taking this personally, D. Scully, and thank you, by the way. This is a friendly debate. D. Scully also said Seb's audience over at the Majority Report is nearly entirely neoliberals and libertarians. Well, it's probably entirely libertarians in terms of who's calling into the show to debate Sam. There is definitely a contingent of like mainstream Democrats who really love the Majority Report, and I think are upset with Sam over Michael's coverage of the primary. I've seen that online, actually. D. Scully is sort of right about that. But nearly entirely neoliberals and libertarians, I think you're exaggerating just a tad. My dad says, Bush's main 2004 campaign claim was the gays are coming for your children. That's where I can't understand Ellen's love for him. It's the money, Pops. It's the money. It doesn't matter when you're rich and famous. Doc says, tomorrow you will have one more Patreon. Thank you, Doc. I appreciate that. I just love your show. Oh, well, I just appreciate you, Doc. Really. Kennedy, I want you to never delete messages again. All right? Unless someone's saying something racist. And by that, I mean actually saying the N-word or something like that. You know how this show rolls. Please do not censor anyone. I can handle it, Kennedy. I can handle it. Can't believe I forgot to mention the super chats. God damn it. Ryan says, regarding Ellen being a scab, look up what she did during the WGA strike years back. They touched on it on MR the other day. What did she do? I'm assuming she hired non-union writers. Kennedy says to me, my little monologue on Bad Praxis, her podcast, I just got fucking owned. Big says, get the Surfs or Hassan. Hassan does his own stream, doesn't he? I don't know if he would do mine if he's got his own thing going. My dad was a fan of Kennedy on that episode of Doom she was on. I'm like, oh, Kennedy says thank you to my pops. How nice. Misha says we have to have Kennedy back on because she has green hair now. Well, Misha, if you have your own show, have Kennedy back on. By all means, feel free. What just happened here? I'm missing a ton of stuff. I just got... Okay, here we go. Who would you rather have a Funko Pop toy of, Binder, says Champagne Kame. Kennedy, Carter, or Reagan? Carter, I guess, right? I mean, the Kennedy Funko Pop is probably cooler looking. Or probably Carter. Although I could have fun with a Reagan Funko Pop in terms of the things I would do to it. I see why you blocked D. Scully now, Kennedy. But still. Kennedy says, it's 11 p.m. on a Friday. Anyone being a pedant on YouTube chat right now belongs in jail. I'll let him slide. From what I'm seeing, he's being annoying, but I'm letting him slide. D. Scully says, the last time I checked on Sam Cedar, the entire boards were filled with libertarians and neoliberals. I have no idea why people think that makes them lefties. I disagree, but that's another episode. That's another thing for another day. Yeah, like someone points out, like Kennedy points out, do you understand the concept of a call-in radio show? Yeah, Sam has libertarians on to debate them. Right. Again, I'm not going to get into it right now, but don't block his comments. D. Scully says there are no real lefty platforms. You don't think this show's a lefty show, D. Scully? You said was your favorite from Majority Report. You don't think this is a lefty show? Come on, D. Scully. And Grimm is rolling off some lefty networks. The Real News Network, Empire Files, Submedia. It's a lot more than that even. Grimm says, Amy Therese found us. Kennedy says to me, to the blocking of D. Scully, Matt, I'm sorry, I had to. D. Scully says, I've already been in the Majority Report a ton of times, and I got the best of him. Although the deck is more than stacked in his favor, Sam cheats. That is not true. I worked on that show, you know that. Sam does not cheat. But send the episode where you debated him. I want to check out what you did, because that's interesting. D. Scully says, yes, Sam Cedar cheats. He lowers the volume on callers. Sometimes he mutes them. There's a 3-second delay, so he uses the delay to benefit him and talk over the caller. I can go on. Well, first of all, the 3-second delay is not something that's purposeful. I mean, I worked on the show. I know the technical limitations. It's not purposeful. So anything involving that, it just is what it is. Sam doesn't lower the volume on callers. In fact, Sam doesn't have the power to do that. When I worked on the show, I had the power to do that, and I know I never did that. He can mute them. That is true. Which, again, the 4.5 years I was on that show, he only did when a caller would go on and on without letting Sam take part in the debate portion of the segment. I mean, you call in to debate someone, you speak your piece, you have to let them answer. I will say I criticize Michael because Michael has a habit of talking on and not letting the other person get a word in edgewise sometimes. But that's Michael. And honestly, he doesn't do it purposefully. It's not some sort of... I know because I see it happen in person when I was there and from when I've been a guest on Majority Report and the Michael Brooks show since I've left. He just has a bad habit of doing that. He's not doing it to purposefully cut off the debate. But Sam never did that when I was there. Champagne Commie says, Matt, if you want to debate someone, have a guest on. I got to get more debate-worthy guests on the show. Because all the guests I have on are educational and good to listen to. I got to get someone who we could debate. It's been a while. My dad's defending Kennedy, telling me to stop criticizing Kennedy. D. Scully says Sam Cedar is one of the lowest human beings on the face of the earth. Kennedy, do you understand why I had you unblock this man? Or woman? I almost missed one of the funniest comments I've ever read. I can't... I am thrilled I read that comment. It's very funny. Misha makes the point. We're talking about Bush Jr. all day, all episode, all night. And, wait, where did that go? We're talking about Bush Jr. all night, but Sam Cedar. Right. D. Scully says, I'm sure that Matt knows that I'm right. I don't know about that. I just said that's not true. If I told the name I used when I called in, I bet that Matt would remember it. Okay, are you... oh boy, I can't remember the names. Are you... Was it Jim from PA? Was that one of the callers? Jim from PA. You didn't give your... These guys says he's not going to tell his name, but you didn't give your full name when you called in. Grim is joking that Jimmy Reefer Cake watches Red Ice now. What? Donkey Show says, Matt, is it possible that Bush was the proto-fascist and Trump is the consequential fascist? Maybe now we can go back to sensibility after Trump. Bob Johnson says, delete me now and turn in your wrench. What? Oh. Big Olemio with a $20 super chat. All right, everyone, listen up. This is the comment to listen to. Super chats get bumped up. They get the immediate... I didn't see it at first. Apparently, he sent it a little bit ago. But you get the immediate read, the immediate answer to whatever question. This is focused on you, everyone. This is Big Olemio's, and I'm sorry if I'm not reading your username right, Big Olemio's Super Chat. Dude, I can't believe you haven't promoted the Super Chat. Also, any thoughts about the kind of personalities and threats we need to keep an eye on in the upcoming post-Trump era of conservatism? I feel bad because this is a Super Chat question, but there's so much to get into here. So let me give you the shortened version, but I promise you, because of this question, I will start working on an episode specifically, a full episode specifically to answer this question. I'm going to screenshot it so I remember. Yes, there are personalities and threats to worry about in the oncoming post-Trump era conservatism. It's hard to name them specifically, although I have some names down, because the Trump era has moved so quickly. There's, every other day, I'm not telling you anything new, there's something new with Trump, which means it also affects how his base and how his faithful subjects view him and the movement surrounding him. There is, I would say, the thing to worry about, in my estimation, to answer this question in a summarized manner, the white supremacists will still be here. They're not going anywhere. But the issue, I think, quite honestly, bigger than even that, is the people who are going ahead and degrading the authenticity of news. It will simply become impossible to tell fact from fiction. I mean, it's already. But once Trump is gone, and people let their guards down because Trump is gone, this whole fake news, disinformation thing is still going to exist. But with people's guards down, it's going to be much more effective. As for specific names, I'll get into that in that episode. I promise. But this $20 super chat, I promise you. I thank you so much. I promise you'll get a full episode on this. It's going to take me a couple of weeks, maybe a few months to get this one together because, honestly, there's probably just a few names off the top of my head who are talking about this. Life after Trump. And I should rewrite your super chat, actually. The oncoming post-Trump era conservatism, there will be a post-Trump era after he's gone. But the post-Trump era of conservatism, nuh-uh. There is no post-Trump era of conservatism in terms of the ideology and where conservatism as a movement has gone. This is Trump's now. Trump as president or Trump impeached and gone from the picture, doesn't matter. The Trump era of conservatism is here to stay. And all those personalities and threats that we're going to keep an eye on in the post-Trump presidency era, they're all greatly influenced by the Trump era of conservatism that's here to stay. Kennedy says, I won't ban people again, but I'll just say even Michael understands why you gotta ban people now sometimes. Well, I'll give you this. When this chat gets as lively as Michael's does, we'll talk about it. But right now, I enjoy the one or two people in here who are giving us shit. Gives me something to criticize and push back on. But I hear you, Kennedy. Brian says you should reach out to Mike from PA. He has a nice Twitch channel now. What are you talking about? Can you send me that? I have no idea what you're talking about. All right, folks. Shayna says MR needs more Jamie. Jamie's great. Let's see. A few more comments, then that's the end of the show. Oh, Doug. I remember Doug. Yes. Thanks, Dad. I remember Doug's first call-in. You were hosting and you eventually hung up on him. Right. Bullwhip says, I'm going to sub now. I don't care what it costs. Thank you, Bullwhip. I appreciate it. D Scully's still going after Sam Cedar in the chat. I'm just going to leave it there. We can get back into it next show. D Scully. Grim says there's a difference between the YouTube stream and the call. There's no delay in the phone line. You were psychotic. I mean, maybe there's a short delay, but you're right. What he was probably didn't even think about that. What he was probably referring to is the delay between the YouTube stream and the call, which is much bigger, obviously. The phone delay is probably nil. Probably can't even notice it. Dorian says, Big Almolo says, full episode on post-Trump conservatism. Dope. Thanks, Matt. Dorian says, that's going to be a good episode. Yep. I've already written it down in my little upcoming guests and show ideas page. And I have, and we'll be doing it for sure. Thank you for that. Grim says, Mike from PA is Central Committee on Twitch now. Are you confusing Mike from PA, though, with Jim from PA? I think those are two separate people. All right, folks. That is our show for today. Oh, I didn't even get to, Elizabeth Warren's great moment at the LGBT forum last night. It was really great. You know me. I'm a Bernie guy all the way, and it doesn't change that, obviously, because I care more about policy than moments. And I criticize Elizabeth Warren, even though she's my number 2 pick. But it was a great moment when she her comment on the question about what would you say to somebody who says marriage is between one man and one woman. We'll bring it up probably on debate night, for sure. Renee says, thoughts on the LaRouche eat babies plant? I was actually going to do a short YouTube only, produced piece on that. And then it got away from me because I was busy. But I think they would still be interested in that. I'll do it. I think. All right, folks. See you all next time on Doomed. Take care. Have a good night.